This is the transition. I'm going to teach you how to shatter unhealthy subconscious patterns, how to eliminate willpower from your life, how to gain extreme clarity on a regular basis, and how to resolve internal conflicts, how to connect with your deep and core why and how to trigger that every single day, how to set and achieve progressively bigger goals, how to live every single day with confidence and purpose, and finally, how to optimize your life for creativity and productivity. This may seem like a big list, but as you will find throughout this training, all of these things are interwoven and connected to each other. As you increase in one of these things, you increase in all of them. So why does this matter? It matters because most people want to have better lives. It's why we set New Year's resolutions, but most people feel hopeless. Most people are living in a reactive state and thus are in survival mode. Spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of these things are being negatively impacted. And so most people have negative momentum in life. And to make things even worse, the environment is becoming so intense, so stimulating, so distracting, and so addicting that most people are living in a state of addiction. They have negative momentum and it's putting their body, their mind in a state of survival mode. It's very difficult for most people. So in this training, I'm going to be shattering some of the core myths that most people think about how to actually change and transform your life. Most people, especially in Western culture, think that you can will your way to change. They have a very individualistic perspective. I'm going to help destroy that. We're going to talk about how most people believe that your behavior is a product of your personality and that your personality and your identity are fixed traits. Instead, you're going to learn how to actually make permanent and lasting change in your life. You're going to learn, and this is based on science, that your personality is actually a product of your behavior and that you can alter and change your personality to become who you want to be by ultimately changing your behavior and changing your environment. And ultimately, your personality and your identity are triggered in unconscious states. They're not permanent traits and that they can change, and you can actually change them radically and consistently. You can become ultimately who you want to be. So before we start, I just want to share with you a few quotes to put things into perspective. These are two of my favorite quotes by Meredith Willson. If you pile up enough tomorrows, you'll find that you are left with nothing but a lot of empty yesterdays. Similarly, from Pablo Picasso, only put off until tomorrow what you are willing to die having left undone. So, as we watch this, I really want you to think about this. Are you ready to live, literally live, every single day? So who am I? I'm Benjamin Hardy. I'm nearing the completion of my PhD in motivation psychology. Over the last 2 years, I've been lucky enough to be the #1 writer out of millions of writers on Medium.com. And in that time, I've gone from 0 to over 300,000 email subscribers to my weekly newsletter. My first traditional book, Willpower Doesn't Work, comes out this upcoming March. And this is a picture of my wife, my awesome wife, Lauren, and our 3 foster kids who we've had for 3 years. But who was I? My life has not always been what it is. I grew up in a broken home. My parents had an extremely rough divorce when I was 12 years old, and my life was a chaotic mess. My father was a very heavy drug addict. We had crazy drug addicts always at my house. It was a really rough environment, and ultimately my younger brothers and I moved with my mom because it was much healthier to be with her, and we were moving apartment to apartment. My mom was an awesome single mom, but she was super busy, and ultimately we had zero structure in our lives, and I barely graduated high school. And during high school and the year following high school, my whole life was basically absorbed in avoiding reality, and I did that through playing World of Warcraft all day. My diet obviously consisted of Mountain Dew, Little Caesars pizza, and the thing that was worst of all was that I began to feel hopeless. I felt like the life that I wanted or just really any sense of identity that I had was drifting further and further out of my control. So at age 19, a little bit less than a year after high school, I started running. I ran all throughout the middle of the night. I got to the point where I was running about 2 to 3 hours, a few nights a week. And ultimately, I ran a marathon. And for the most part, everything in my life was staying the same. But, so I was playing World of Warcraft all day. Not much was changing, but during these evenings, I would run. And while I was running, I was just thinking. I was thinking that whole time, and I allowed myself to just actually think about, who am I? Who do I want to be? And I actually gave myself the space to reconnect with who I am. Those were some very pivotal runs. And so eventually, during those runs, after that marathon, watching myself do this, I really started to disconnect from the environment of my life, from living at my mom's apartment, from being around my high school friends that were just playing video games and not really going anywhere. And so I decided I needed to leave. I needed a fresh start. I needed a new identity. So at age 20, I decided to serve a 2-year humanitarian mission. All of my time during those 2 years was dedicated to helping other people, doing service, learning, and writing. It was during those 2 years that I started journaling, and I got to the point where I was journaling 1 to 2 hours every single day. And one of my favorite things I learned was, so also during that time, I was reading about 2 hours a day, engaging in tons of meaningful community service, teaching and helping people change their lives. And while I was writing in my journal, I learned to write stream of consciously, where I would write and I would learn while I wrote, and I could just write for hours. And so it was actually during those experiences that I decided I wanted to become a writer. So I came home from this amazing experience at age 22, and I started college immediately. And take in mind, I barely graduated high school. I actually had to plant a tree outside the school to make up for missed classes, and I graduated with very poor grades. But after having that transformational experience, I literally came back a new person, and I flew through college from start to finish in less than 3 years, got straight A's. I married my wife. And then since then, I'm now, as I'm recording this, 29 years old. Over the last 7 years, I've been studying psychology. I've read nearly 1,000 books. I've been reading, writing, and basically dedicating my life since this time to learning how to help myself and help other people and live a great life. And so I know, given the life transformation that I've had, that you can change your life and you can change your identity, because I've been doing this now for going on a decade. You can continually and consistently upgrade who you are. This is something that I've been studying, but it's something that I experience every single day. And so you can grow, you can change your inner and your outer worlds. And the fact is that you actually must change both. You can't change your inner world without simultaneously changing your environment. Both are key. That's something I learned through my mission, and that's something I've since learned as a psychologist. So with that backdrop, thank you for letting me share a little bit of my story. If you haven't heard some of those aspects, that's who I am, and that's how I got here. So let's start this training. The purpose of this training is to help you upgrade your whole life in 2018. Your change as a person does not need to be incremental. It actually can be radical. You can change 10x. You can change 100x. You can make huge improvements. I've personally experienced this, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Napoleon Hill. He says, "When riches begin to come, they come so quickly, in such great abundance, that one wonders where they have been hiding in all those lean years." So, once you start to have this psychological upgrade, once you begin to truly understand these higher level principles, and once you understand how to develop this confidence and develop who you want to be, you start to see amazing things come into your life. So we're going to start by talking about willpower, because this is one of the first myths I want to bust. And this is a picture of my upcoming book, Willpower Doesn't Work. And it comes out next March. I'm really excited. You're going to love this book. So if you're required to use willpower in your life, there's a few reasons why. Number one is that you have not made up your mind for what you want. Think about it. If you're in an environment where, let's just say, someone's offering you a cookie, and then you're forced to use willpower, it's because you didn't decide before that fact that you weren't going to do it. Also, your desire or your core why for what you're trying to pursue isn't strong enough. You haven't fully committed to what you're going to do, and then your environment opposes your goals. So you haven't created an environment that facilitates your goals. You haven't made a firm decision. Your core why is not clear, and you're not committed. That's why people have willpower. That's why they're internally conflicted and confused. Here's just some fabulous quotes to prove this. So Dr. Marshall Goldsmith said, "If we do not create and control our environment creates and controls us." And then Arnold Washington, he's one of the top researchers on addiction, says, "Many people think that the addict needs willpower, but nothing can be further from the truth." Helia said, "Willpower is for people who are still uncertain about what they want." And ultimately, Michael Jordan said, "Once I made a decision, I never thought about it again." So when it comes to making commitment happen, when it comes to achieving your goals, here are what you need to eliminate willpower from your life. First, you need to invest up front in what you want. Let's just say you want to run a marathon. Well, you need to sign up for that marathon. You need to make it public. You need to set a timeline. You need to install several layers of feedback and accountability into your environment, whether that's having an accountability partner. Let's just say you sign up for the race with someone. You need instant feedback. That's actually a flow trigger, is when you get immediate feedback for your performance, that forces you to perform better. And that's really how the most successful organizations set up their jobs, is that people get feedback immediately on their performance, and that forces you into a flow state and it forces you to improve. Then you need to remove or alter everything from your environment that opposes your goals. If you do all of these things, willpower won't be a part of your life and you'll be continuing on a virtuous cycle upwards towards your goals. All right, so now I'm going to talk about the psychology of success, how to change your brain, how to change your identity. And really, this is the science of how to go from being a dreamer or a wannabe to someone who's totally doing something and being successful. And this has been the crux of my research throughout my doctorate. This is what I've been studying, and I've specifically been studying it on what are the psychological differences between wannabe entrepreneurs and actual entrepreneurs. And the core thing that I have found is what I call a point of no return moment. And basically, a point of no return can happen in one of two ways. You can either wait and wish for something outside of you to happen, or you can make it happen yourself. And I'm going to explain how to make it happen yourself in the most effective way. And the problem with the first one about waiting for something to happen is that it rarely happens. But I'm just going to give you one example, and it's an extreme example of one person's point of no return experience. So one of the people I interviewed in my research, his brother committed suicide. And that moment caused him, obviously, a ton of reflection. And ultimately, he realized life was short and that he needed to go forward and pursue his dreams. And then he did that. That is the exception. It's not the rule, and you shouldn't wait for something to happen. Instead, you need to make it happen. And I'm going to share a quick story of a kid I interviewed, and then I'm going to dive into how can you create a point of no return in your own life. So one of the people I interviewed in my research, I love this kid. He was a 17-year-old kid, and he and his high school friend, a partner, invested $1,000 into a shipment of shoes. And here's how he described his own point of no return. And by the way, the question I asked all of these people, wannabes and actual entrepreneurs, was, have you ever had a point of no return? Almost all the true entrepreneurs said yes, whereas all of the wannabes said no, but they anticipated it or hoped it would happen one day. So here's what the 17-year-old kid said to my question. He said, yeah, once we had all of our money in the same inventory, it was all or nothing. That really scared me. Just knowing that it was like do or die. I had to sell the shoes. You couldn't go back. You couldn't just get rid of them and get cash back. You had to go forward. That is the essence of a point of no return, is that you put yourself in a position where you cannot go back. So here was my follow-up question. Did anything change after this moment? And this is what the 17-year-old kid said. He said, after that, once I realized that we were truly going in everything, I think it really just opened me up to what I was able to do. At that point, I was like, okay, I actually started a company. I've invested in it, and now I need to run this thing. That's when I think I really saw that I was running the company. It really changed my leadership role, I think, with my partners. So how does this work? How does a point of no return happen? Ultimately, it happens because of a concept called sunk cost bias. When you become invested in something, you become committed to that thing. You begin to wrap your identity into it. That's what happened to the 17-year-old kid. Once he invested $10,000 in his shoes, he realized he first off had to go forward. He couldn't turn back. He put himself in a position where he literally had to go forward. Second off, he saw himself differently. And that is one of the core differences between wannabes and true people, is that there's an ideology or an identifying shift. You stop thinking you want to do something and you start seeing yourself as that thing. So once you are invested, you must go forward and your identity changes. And then because you must go forward, you're no longer confused about what you need to do. You're no longer certain how you're going to act because you have to act. You put yourself in a position where you must go forward. And psychologically, again, this works for a few different reasons. This is how sunk cost bias works. Basically, sunk cost bias is that once you become invested in something, you increase your commitment to it over and over and over again. And why do you do it? First off, ultimately, you just don't want to look like an idiot. You want to justify your investment. You want to be consistent to the behaviors you've performed. You want to be consistent to the commitment you made, because ultimately, we as human beings want to be perceived as consistent. And one thing that's really cool about this, and this compounds what I'm talking about, is that your identity actually follows your behavior. So once you make an investment, you begin to identify as someone who is an entrepreneur or a writer or whatever it is you want to do. And so your identity follows your behavior, and you can ultimately change your identity very quickly by investing in your goals. And then lastly, because you actually want to achieve something and now you've created an environment that will actually force you to do it, which creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. So bringing this all together, once you've passed your point of no return, you've fully bought into your own vision. You're now committed, and therefore your role and your identity change. You've removed alternatives, and so there's no longer distractions in your way. You've forced your own hand, and now you must move in the direction you want to go. You're all in. So what about you? Are you invested in yourself? Are you invested in your dreams? Or are you still a wannabe? Are you still thinking that one day something's going to happen that will force you to do it? Your level of success can almost directly be measured to how personally invested you are in whatever it is you're doing. If you want to be a successful athlete, how invested do you think you need to be? So this brings me to the power of moments. As human beings, we live our life in moments, and certain moments define our identity. They define who we are, and certain moments can act as transitions, allowing us to re-identify. That's why when you set New Year's resolutions, you may actually still be pursuing the same goals, but you say, this is the new me in 2018. And this goes right along with my research that the moment someone commits to being an entrepreneur, they then shift their identity. This is the new me. I'm now an entrepreneur. And this is why investment is super important. Once you become invested, you experience a psychological upgrade. You shatter your subconscious pattern and you upgrade your sense of what you deserve. And if you've ever read a book, I'm going to actually give you one of my top book recommendations. This is from Dr. David Hawkins. His book is called Letting Go. And this is a quote all about the unconscious. It says, "The unconscious will allow us to only have what we believe we deserve. The more we hang on to our negativity and small self-image that results, the less we think we deserve. If we have a small view of ourselves, then what we deserve is poverty. And our unconscious will see to it that we will have that actuality." So what is this psychological upgrade all about? When you invest in yourself, when you shatter your identity, you upgrade your sense of what you believe you deserve in your life, and you begin to identify with someone who can have, be, and do way more. I can talk with confidence to this. I've personally invested so much in my own skills as a writer, in myself as a parent, in my own self-improvement. As I talked about in my story, I've spent the last decade basically investing in the person I've become. And as my research shows, as the science shows, once you become invested, that is the fastest way to shatter your sense of who you think you are, to shatter what you believe you deserve, and ultimately it will allow you to upgrade your sense for what you can have. You'll go from having a small self-image deserving poverty to one deserving a state of abundance. And then this is one of my favorite quotes. Again, you can't truly be committed to something unless you're invested. And once you become committed and you have this new sense of identity, you can change your life. So this is basically what will happen once you cross your point of no return. And again, all throughout my research, every person I asked what happened afterward, they said that they had more confidence. Things just started happening. And this quote really shows it. So this is by William Hutchinson Murray. He says, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would have never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidences and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way." That is what will happen once you cross your point of no return. That is why Ralph Waldo Emerson said, once you make a decision, the universe conspires to make it happen. That can't happen unless you become invested in what you're doing. You shatter your subconscious paradigms, you become committed, and then you begin to develop this identity that this is who you are. And then you develop an expectation. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I'm going to go into a lot of the research on expectancy and resolve and all of these things, but I just want to plant the seed that once you get invested and you become literally a new person and you're committed to that, it will happen. So this brings me to the new science of transformation. And I'm going to start with an idea called self-signaling. Basically, what self-signaling is it's a psychological concept that tells us that we as people don't know ourselves as much as we think we do. We actually judge and evaluate ourselves the same way we judge and evaluate other people. We do that based on our behavior. So if you're behaving a certain way, you'll begin to identify with those behaviors. Let's just say it's drinking alcohol and watching TV all night. If you do that over time consistently, you'll begin to identify as someone who does those things. What if you start waking up early in the morning and you start doing that consistently? You begin to identify as someone who wakes up early. If you invest in starting a company, you'll begin to identify as that. That's how self-signaling works, is that we identify ourselves based on our behaviors. Precognition is another concept that talks about how our inner state, our psychology, is actually the product of our behaviors and our environments, and that you can actually predict who you will believe you are. You'll predict your inner state, whether that's your emotions, your psychology, by behaving in certain ways. One of my favorite examples of precognition is just taking a cold shower. I know that the moment I'm going to take a cold shower, I will feel confident. I'll feel motivated. It'll change my identity. It'll change my behavior. And so you can specifically predict your inner state by behaving in certain ways, by putting yourself in certain environments. And then there's this whole new field called epigenetics that's been going on for a few decades now that shows that your biology is very fluid, that actually your biology is the product of your environment, that it's not the genes that you were born with that matters, it's actually the genes that are expressed. And that based on your behaviors and your environments, your genes are either activated or deactivated, and that you literally have a ton of power in manipulating your biological structure. And obviously, there's a lot of research now on brain plasticity showing how fluid, flexible, and literally changeable our brains are. So what all this research is showing is that humans are far more adaptable and changeable than we used to think we are. So your identity comes from your behavior. Actually, almost all the research in psychology shows that your personality and your identity come from two things. Number one, your environment. Number two, your repeated behavior. I'm going to actually share 3 cool strands of science that talk about this. So one of my favorite research papers is a meta-analysis on confidence. So a lot of people think that your confidence is what leads to success, that confident people are more successful. And obviously that's true, but where does the confidence come from? Are you born with it? Is that a fixed trait? No, actually the research shows that your confidence isn't necessarily what leads to success. It's actually success that leads to confidence. If you start acting in certain ways and performing and actually doing what you say you're going to do and start making progress, confidence will ensue. Confidence is a byproduct. It's not a cause. And then once you develop that confidence, obviously that will lead to a virtuous cycle of taking on bigger goals. And really, confidence and having a growth mindset are essentially the same thing. Having a growth mindset is the belief that you can change, that you can learn new things, that you can evolve, that you can become someone new, versus a fixed mindset, which is the belief that you can't change, that you have fixed traits, that you are only good at certain things and bad at certain things. There's so much research on learning theories that are showing that this is very false. Basically, people have a fixed mindset because they've bought into this myth that they have a fixed personality, a fixed identity. And really what that means is just that they don't believe that they can learn certain things. And so ultimately, how you develop confidence and how you develop a growth mindset are 2 of the exact same things. You start putting yourself in certain environments, you start behaving in certain ways. Ultimately, you shatter your subconscious patterns, and you ultimately grow into someone who believes you can change. You begin to believe that you can learn new things. You put yourself in difficult environments, and you start to grow in your confidence and your growth mindset. These 2 things are effects. They're not causes, and they're very much under your own control. And this is a huge shift because over the past 100 years, the Western world has been obsessed with fixed traits. There's a reason why I would say most people actually have a fixed mindset. For example, the first theory of leadership back in the 50s and 60s was called the Great Man Theory, and it was all focused on the fact that leaders could only be men. They had to be like 6 feet tall or higher. They had to be extroverts. There was this focus on like, we have to find these people with these traits, and anyone without those traits can't be a good leader. And then we see this huge inflow of personality tests, strength finders, these types of things that have led people to think that like they have this fixed personality type and that they have certain skills and then they have certain weaknesses and that they can't change those things. So this is leading most people to believing that they have a fixed and unchanging identity. And to quote one of my favorite authors, Wayne Dyer, he said, when you change the way you see things, the things you see change. And given all the research on self-signaling, precognition, epigenetics, brain plasticity, and so much more, you have to just see the stuff for what it is. It's a myth. This whole thing is stopping you. It's putting you in a fixed mindset, and it's stopping you from learning, growing, changing. And all you have to do is change your behavior, change your environment, cross your point of no return, and decide who you want to be. So let's get into some very specific strategies. Everything up until this point has been very high level, very much paradigm stuff about willpower, about identity. But now I'm going to just spend the rest of my time talking about very specific strategies, behaviors, things you can do to begin optimizing your life. So first off, you want to set your life up for recovery. And ultimately, there's 6 things that you want to recover from every single day. You need to recover from work, technology, people, food, fitness, and obviously being awake. You need to optimize your life for sleep, because ultimately rest and recovery are where you will experience your biggest growth. We see this with fitness. If you push yourself in the gym but you never allow yourself to rest, you're not actually going to get stronger and better. If you never get good sleep, your brain is not going to learn things, put things together. Obviously, there's so much research on fasting, whether it be intermittent fasting or fasting for long periods of time as a reset to your body. And then, giving yourself time from people, technology, work. So here's some of the research on what happens when you allow yourself to recover and detach from work. Basically, what the research says is that if you never allow yourself to detach from work, which means that you let it get off of your mind, take a serious break, engage in something else, then you can never actually reattach to work while you're there in a full flow state. So this is what some of the research has found on what happens to people when they allow themselves to detach from work. You get less fatigue, less procrastination. You're far more engaged. You're way more in a flow. Can become literally a regular daily thing. You have more balance, which leads to a higher quality of life. You have a greater marital satisfaction, way more mental health. And then technology. We live in a state of such addiction to technology, and this is what some of the research has found on smartphone addiction. Increased depression, anxiety, daytime dysfunction, way less sleep, which affects everything else, decreased psychological and emotional well-being. Again, all of these things are related. If you have a negative relationship with technology, it's going to impact your work, it's going to impact your health, it's going to impact everything. How you do anything is how you do everything. When you change one aspect of your life, you change all aspects of your life. And so every single one of these things is connected, and this is why people are in a state of survival mode, is because technology pervades our whole lives. It's super hard. And think about the Industrial Revolution, what it did to our food. And so we have to get really good at creating and controlling our environment, or our environment creates and controls us. Here's some more things that happen with cell phone addiction. You'll have decreased emotional intelligence, a poor ability to connect with others. You'll have way more stress. People who are addicted to technology have worse academic performances, and ultimately what the best research is showing is that you want to stay away from your screens an hour or two before you go to bed to optimize for melatonin release and high quality sleep. So what do we do with all this? Well, here are some solid benchmarks about what you can actually do to improve and adjust your technology usage. Avoid technology for the first 30 or 60 minutes of when you're awake. And I'm going to show you a lot of things that you can do with that. But most people, there's a lot of research that says that most people within the first 5 minutes of their day, the first thing they do is actually not even look at their spouse for those who are married. But the first thing they do is look at their cell phones. They jump into social media or email, and immediately they put themselves in a reactive state. They begin reacting to an environment rather than putting themselves in a peak state, thinking about what they want and proactively operating. So you need to avoid mindless internet use, social media use. Give yourself some rules to operate with. And I would say avoid this stuff as long as you can in the morning, because morning time should be creation mode. And then avoid smartphone use before you go to bed as well, because you want to put yourself into a state where you're focused on what you want the next day, where you can begin priming your subconscious mind. We'll go into that a little bit more. And then also, this is something that very few people do anymore, but keep your smartphone away from your body when you're with other people. Like when you're at restaurants or when you're with people, if the phone is on your body, you're probably going to subconsciously or unconsciously start using it. So these are some keys that you can use. So your use of technology is going to influence your sleep. And there's so much science at this point on the importance of sleep. Here's just basically a list of what will happen in your life if you optimize your life for sleep. And again, you can't do that if technology is running your life. So if you get good sleep, you'll have increased memory, longer life, decreased inflammation in your body, increased creativity, increased attention, decreased depression, decreased fat and muscle, and increased muscle mass, less stress, and a decreased risk of getting into accidents. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about how you can get awesome clarity in your life. So you want to put yourself out of your routine environment regularly. And so this is what Tim Ferriss would call mini retirements. It's what some people would call disconnected days. Ultimately, you want to give yourself some space where you can get out of your routine environment. And then while you're outside of your routine environment, you want to make some serious decisions. So Tony Robbins has this 3-step process. He says that you need to make decisions first off while you're in a peak state, because the mindset that you're in when you make your decisions influences the quality of those decisions. And if you're in your routine, if you're just in your regular go flow, you're probably not operating at this peak level, and your decisions are probably not powerful. And so you need to get out of your routine environment regularly so that you can see your life and make huge decisions. And then obviously you need to commit to those decisions, and we've already talked about that the level of commitment is based on the level of investment. Then you need to experience this state of resolve that what you've decided is finished. It's going to happen. And we've already talked about this. What happens after the point of no return? You experience this state of hope, this resolve, this confidence that what you want is going to happen, and then therefore the universe conspires to make it happen. We've already covered all this, but you want to make your decisions in a peak state, and that's best done outside your regular and routine environment. And then ultimately, while you're outside your routine environment, you can be really honest with yourself. You can resolve the conflicts you have within yourself, within your relationships, and you can make the changes you need to when you go back into your routine. While you're outside your environment, you can reconnect with your why, and that's where you set your 10x intentions. And those are the decisions that Tony Robbins is talking about, is while you're giving yourself a day of rest or a weekend break or a regular vacation, that's when you want to set your huge goals. And it's so much easier to get into a peak state when you're regularly getting out of your routine. Once you've gone out of your routine regularly, you've seen your life for what it is, you've made these huge intentions and goals, then you need a daily environment to recreate the peak state that you had when you set your goals. You need to have a daily sacred environment that triggers creativity, clarity, motivation. Honestly, this doesn't need to be something elaborate. For me, my sacred environment is my car. I wake up at between 5 and 6 a.m. every day. First thing I do is I go out to my car with my journal. I drive to a parking lot across the street, and I have some meditation, some prayer, and then I pull out my journal. And that environment literally triggers clarity, focus. I absolutely don't take my cell phone with me in that environment. And here's what's cool, is that there's so much research about the subconscious mind and also just about your brain first thing in the morning after a great night's sleep. So your subconscious all throughout the night while you've been asleep has been solving problems. It's been learning, reorganizing information, and you can tap into those subconscious breakthroughs and draw insight from them, especially through writing in your journal. And I'm going to actually go into some specific journal writing strategies in a minute, but you want to pull out your journal and you want to just start writing, and you're going to pull amazing insights. And there's a lot of research that shows that your prefrontal cortex is super creative first thing in the morning. Your mind is most clear. And so rather than reactively getting sucked into technology, you want to put yourself into an environment that triggers a peak state, and then you want to start pulling from your subconscious breakthroughs. You want to start thinking about your big goals, and ultimately, I'm going to show you later, you want to connect with your why and live a proactive life. So while you pull out your journal, you want to prime hope or expectancy before you meditate, before you pray or journal. And what that basically means is that before you pull out your journal, you want to prime yourself into a state of optimism, this state of resolve that Tony Robbins is talking about, where you have this full-on belief that what you're going to pursue is going to happen. Who you want to be that day is going to happen. You need to have that state of expectancy and trust before you start pulling out the journal, or else your journal writing even or your visualizations are going to actually be weak. You need to put yourself into a state where you trust and you have confidence, and then your visualizations, your decisions, your focus, your journal writing is going to be powerful. Then you pull out the journal, and ultimately, here's what you use your journal for. You clarify ideas or insights. That could be just about things you're learning. You affirm to yourself about the goals you're going to pursue. You make strategic plans about those goals, and then you gratefully acknowledge the fact that outside factors are going to play a role. That's what the quote on commitment was all about, that the universe conspires to make things happen. You need to gratefully acknowledge that you are not fully the cause of your success, and that there's a lot of factors playing in allowing you to achieve your goals. And really, when you're writing your strategic plans, that's the most important part in your journaling your journaling morning routine is that obviously you're going to take some time to affirm to yourself that your goals are going to happen. There's so much, great examples. The guy who wrote the Dilbert cartoons, he did a great podcast with Tim Ferriss, and he talked about how every morning before he became a famous cartoonist, he would write to himself every morning in his journal, I'm going to be a famous cartoonist. I'm going to be a famous cartoonist. There's so many examples of people who have done this with their journals. So obviously you want to take some time after you've primed yourself to this expectancy and hope to write down in your affirmative way that your goals are going to happen. But then, more importantly than that, this is where the subconscious breakthroughs happen and where creativity happens in the morning. You want to write strategic plans for how to make it happen. And what you will find when you're writing in your journal, especially if you get really good at this, is this stream of consciousness, this inflow, where you'll get insights and ideas about how to achieve your goals. I can't tell you how many times this has happened for me. When I'm writing in my journal, I'll get this idea. You need to reach out to this person. That's a subconscious breakthrough. I write it down. Sometimes I act immediately. I'll go home after my journal writing session and immediately reach out to that person. I'll get ideas about goals I should pursue or pathways to achieving that goal. Those are the most important insights you'll get in your journal writing session, and then obviously gratitude. All right, so I'm just going to do a quick review of that because there was a lot of stuff in there. When you're first thing in the morning in your sacred environment, pull out your journal, focus on gratitude and appreciation. You can also be very brutally honest with yourself in your journal, and that can act as a way to release and let go of suppressed emotions. Then write your big picture dreams and goals. Write them because this is how you reframe your subconscious. You do it in an affirmative way, and then, as I already said, spend the majority of your time strategizing what you want to do to achieve that goal. This is where you'll get those intuitive insights, those subconscious breakthroughs. So just kind of rounding this out, what is the morning routine actually for? There's so much hype about morning routines, but why do you even want a morning routine? First and foremost, it's to reconnect with yourself and your why. It's to put yourself in this peak state where you can achieve your vision. It's to frame yourself for what you actually want that day. And again, that probably won't happen if you're living reactively. So ultimately, you want to put yourself in a state where you're living proactively so that you can avoid the self-sabotage that's continually happening to most people. And when you get really, really good at having a morning routine, you will find that you are 10x, 100x more productive than most people. There's a concept that one of my really good friends told me. He said that basically there's the 3 M's. Make money in the morning, because once you get good at putting yourself in this peak state, once you get good at working first thing in the morning, you will realize how optimal your brain works compared to how most people set their lives up and really how society is set up. That you can actually get more done in a one morning peak state morning than most people accomplish all week, because again, most people, their environment conflicts with their goals. They're in a state of heavy distraction. They're not getting a lot done. And so here's just another couple bullets, just to think about is don't schedule meetings with people until after 10 a.m. Noon is best. That's what most of the high performers do, is they give themselves the morning to have space, to connect with themselves, and then ultimately to do their most high impact, high priority, and high creative work. And then in their morning routine, they're continually upgrading their psychological state about what they deserve and their personal standards, because as Tony Robbins said, your life is what you're willing to tolerate. And as you give yourself this consistent morning routine of connecting with your why, of upping your goals, of affirming them, and then again, your confidence, your identity is a product of your behavior. Once you start consistently acting proactively, your identity will change. You'll begin achieving goals faster. You'll begin investing more in yourself. You'll begin tolerating less garbage in your life, less crappy environments, less crappy foods, less crappy behaviors. You'll begin only tolerating amazing things in your life because your subconscious mind will believe that you deserve only great things, and your personal standards will transform. This is why morning routines are so important, and this is how you can have optimal creativity and productivity in your life. But obviously, your morning routine is not going to be optimal. I've already talked about this if you don't have an evening routine. Thomas Edison said, never go to bed without providing a request to your subconscious mind. So 5 to 10 minutes is all you really need right before you go to bed. You want to spend some time in, so please don't reactively look at technology. Don't stare at your smartphone first thing before bed. Give yourself some time to visualize. Remember, you want to trigger hope expectancy, and resolve. And I'm going to go into some of the deeper science in that. But you want to visualize and you want to put yourself into a position of, what am I going to do first thing in the morning? Who do I want to be? And you want to then spend some time thinking about your big picture goals, because ultimately while you're asleep, your subconscious is going to be at work figuring those things out. And then when you pull out your journal, you're going to prime a peak state, then you're going to write those things, and your subconscious is going to give you the answers to your questions. It's going to help you strategize about how you can achieve your goals. So again, don't look at your screen right before bed. So now I'm going to actually go into some of the science on how this works. So there's a theory in psychology called hope theory, and it means that you can't have hope or an optimistic expectation that your goals are going to happen if you haven't clearly conceptualized your goals, if you haven't developed specific strategies to reach those goals, and then if you don't initiate and sustain the motivation for actually using the strategies you've developed. That's why you need to continually do this. That's why you have to do this for 52 weeks a year, is because you have to sustain motivation. And you can't sustain motivation if you don't have an optimal morning routine and an evening routine where you're continually priming yourself to do this. And so yeah, that's how hope works. And then this is how expectancy works. So expectancy theory is one of the core motivational theories. And basically it says that your level of motivation is first based on the value you place on your goal. If you don't have a firm why, if it's not powerful and provoking to you, you're not going to be motivated. If you don't believe that you can actually perform the behaviors that will achieve your goal, and then if you don't believe in your own ability to execute those behaviors, then you're not going to be motivated. And so that is why this whole growth mindset, this whole belief that your confidence, your behaviors can shift and change is so important. Is because if you don't value your goal, and if you don't believe that you know the behaviors that will achieve it, and that you don't believe you yourself can achieve those behaviors, you're not going to have motivation. You won't expect success to happen. And as the research shows, what you expect to happen is essentially what generally does happen. They call that selective attention, that your beliefs end up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why you need to alter your beliefs, and you do that by altering your behavior and your environment. All right, so the last strand of psychological theory and science that I'm going to go into is goal orientation. And basically what the research shows is that all goals occur in only one of two ways. Either you're approaching something or you're avoiding something. If you're approaching something, that means that you're focused more on the rewards than the risks. Whereas if you're avoiding something, you're more focused on your current situation. You're trying to not lose ground. Basically, you're either on offense or defense. And the idea is that you need to shift that. You need to ultimately put your life on offense towards your goals. And investment is how you shatter this. Investment is how you go from focusing on risks to rewards. It's how you increase your confidence that you can take on big things. So here's a breakdown of what you actually need to achieve a goal. You need a clear goal. You can't actually have hope or expectancy if you don't. Then you need to actually want that goal, because if you don't value it, you won't seek it. Then you need to believe that you can actually achieve your goal. And this is the whole idea of fixed versus growth mindset. If you don't believe that you can change, if you don't believe that you can achieve something, you won't expect it to happen. You can't have motivation. Once you believe it, you can expect it. And this is the best way to do this is to invest yourself in that thing. Once you become invested, you shift your identity. You become committed. You expect that amazing things will happen. You become resolved. So if you need to value your goal in order to be motivated, I want to ask you the question, why do you want to do this? Think about your goal. Think about whatever goal you have. Why do you want to do it? I'm about to show you an incredible and simple strategy for determining your why. And once you get deep into that why, you'll realize that either you value or don't value your goal. And if it's something you heavily value, then you can figure out how to create the psychological state to achieve it. So the purpose of clarifying your why is twofold. First off, clarity is what leads to motivation. Second off, operating from your core convictions is what leads to authentic and optimal performance. If you know exactly why, at the deepest levels, why you're doing what you're doing, you will be what psychologists call pulled forward rather than having to push yourself with willpower. So here's the simple strategy. Think about any goal you have. Think about specifically for 2018, what is something big you want to do? Put it in this simple question. What about blank is important to me? So I want you to ask yourself that question 7 times, and here's really how it works. Let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, it's that you want 6-pack abs. Well, what about having 6-pack abs is important to me? You may realize either that it's not that important to you, but let's just say it is. What about it is important? Well, put the first thing in your mind. It could be just that you have more confidence. Well, then put that thing in the second line. What about having more confidence is important to me? And then you just put the response to that question in the same question. You ask yourself this question, what about blank is important to me 7 times? Keep going, because what you'll find is that the first few responses are actually very surface level. You're asking them with your head, not your heart. And then ultimately, if you're actually answering these questions authentically, by the time you get to about stage 5 of asking yourself this question, you'll really start to think about, why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? You're going to start to think back to your childhood. You're going to start to think about your core convictions and beliefs in life. And those are the beliefs and convictions that you want to remind yourself of every time you're trying to go to the gym to get 6-pack abs, because getting just those abs is not that important. It's actually something more important. And it really could be about anything. It could be about improving your marriage. It could be about, making $1 million or starting this business. Why do you really want this? You need to know what that why is. And that is the why that you want to trigger first thing in the morning so that you can operate from your highest convictions every single day. Finally, we're going to talk a little bit about altering your environment, because if your environment is not being controlled, then you're being controlled by it. And forcing functions are one of the coolest ways, most effective ways to changing your environment. So Dan Martell is a very successful entrepreneur, and this is what he said. He said, if you're serious, sometimes you need to go all in. This sounds a lot like the point of no return, doesn't it? He continues, not because it's required, but more because it's what's going to set you up for the highest likelihood of a positive outcome. It's not about prioritizing or saying no, it's about setting up the right environment for you to be productive. So ultimately, how do you set up the right environment? Here's just a few key examples. I've already talked about it. Leave the cell phone in your car. That's a forcing function. When your cell phone's in your car, you're ultimately forced into a flow state while you're with your family in a high state of engagement. Another example, and this actually comes from Dan Martell, it's pretty funny. He says he uses this as a forcing function. He purposefully leaves his laptop charger at home when he works. He goes to a library, and without a laptop charger, he knows his computer's only going to last for about 3 hours. That forces him to be focused. Investing big is one of the best forcing functions. Again, once you become invested, you become committed. If you've heard of Ramit Sethi, one of the things he says is that he invests huge every year in a personal trainer. He actually spends a gross amount, $50,000 a year on a personal trainer. Why? Because that level of investment forces him to go to the gym and to get in shape. He invests to force himself forward. Setting short timelines is how you can create forcing functions. Removing distractions. Necessity is the mother of invention. Ultimately, you want to create an environment, a situation that forces you forward. It's very similar to the 17-year-old kid that I interviewed. Put yourself in a position where there are no alternatives. That's what Tony Robbins, and really what a lot of people have said is the core definition of decision, is to cut away alternatives, to put yourself in a position of necessity where you have to move forward. That is what setting up the right environment is all about. And finally, the last thing is just that you need to continually improve who you are. Jim Rohn said, if you work hard at your job, you can make a living. But if you work hard on yourself, you can make a fortune. And the reason for that is that when you work on yourself, you increase your capacity for what you can do. You increase your sense of what you deserve. You continually shatter your beliefs about what you can do. And so how do you do that? We've already really covered it. This is just review. But you want to spend 20% of your energy on work, and you want to optimize 80% of your energy for rest and improvement. Because if you're focused on improvement and rest, you're going to be, first off, recovering. And we've talked a lot about sleep. We've talked a lot about disconnected days for clarity. If you're clear and you're rested and you're motivated, you can accomplish more in less time, because first off, you're focused on the right things, but also your time is totally optimized, whereas most people are performing at very low levels. And so when you're focused on yourself, when you're improving yourself, your work will be better, it'll be more focused. That's why Abraham Lincoln said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So rather than just working with a dull axe all day, work on yourself. Sharpen yourself so that your work becomes better. So as I've talked about all of this science, all of these strategies, I want you to ask yourself honestly, how are you doing with these things in your life? How are you doing with these things in 2017? What do you want to do with these things in 2018? I can promise you, if you do these things, you can become a much different and better version of yourself. How would your life be if you mastered this stuff? How would your life be if you got consistent and thus you got momentum at these things? You can't get momentum without consistency. Again, you do not have a fixed identity. You can't change your life through grit and willpower. You must change your environments and you must shatter and upgrade your subconscious patterns. Obviously, you can tell that I'm passionate about this. I've been spending essentially the last decade studying motivation and performance psychology, and more importantly, I live this stuff myself. I'll just tell you about 2017 real quick. So for my book, Willpower Doesn't Work, I got paid pretty much $250,000 to write that book. And what do you think I did with that money? I actually invested almost all of it into my self-improvement. I spent $35,000 on a mentor to help me write the book and market it, and I spent $100,000 on a mastermind group so that I can upgrade my business skills, my self-improvement. And I can just honestly tell you, the psychological upgrade was amazing. And so that's why I want to help you. And so I've created a solution to help you upgrade your psychology and transform yourself in 2018. I call it 52 Weeks of Momentum, and it is a program unlike anything you will ever find. 52 Weeks of Momentum is going to help you shatter your subconscious beliefs that are currently holding you hostage. It's going to help you create the life you want. It's going to help you to develop true confidence. If you so choose, you can radically increase your income with 52 Weeks of Momentum, because literally everything we've talked about in this video is training you to transform your subconscious mind, transform your daily behaviors. And if you want, and as I've applied it myself, you can use this course to completely 10x your income. You can transform your body, deepen your relationships, and really this course is about how you can upgrade your whole life. So how is 52 Weeks of Momentum going to help you do all these things? First, you're going to get weekly training and challenges. Unlike most online courses where you get all the information at once, 52 Weeks of Momentum provides you with a new lesson every week where you'll get challenges, exercises. There's going to be 30-day challenges. There's incentive competitions. There's tracking sheets to keep you accountable. Ultimately, there's a Facebook community of like-minded people who are heavily invested and committed to their self-improvement that you're going to be a part of. In the weekly trainings, you are going to get the best personal development training you can find. This is the best training available. I've been studying this stuff for going on a decade. I read 2 to 3 books a week. I'm applying my psychological knowledge into this course to make sure that you stay motivated, accountable, and committed to your goals. How am I going to do that? Gamification. How does this work? Well, for the people who stay with me every week, for those people who are tracking their progress, those people who are givers to the whole group, for those people who are actually making things happen, and most importantly, transforming their lives, improving their income, improving their relationships in their life, the people who are winning at this course will get bonuses. They'll get bonus content, potentially private coaching. A small group of people is going to be in my private mastermind group. On the flip side, for those who are not tracking their progress, not doing the exercises, and ultimately not changing their lives, they'll be penalized. They'll stop getting content until they start improving and upgrading themselves, until they start being a giver in the 52 Weeks of Momentum community, not a taker. You need to participate and be helpful to the whole group. And ultimately, for those who are killing it, I'm going to write about you, your brand, your company. I have blogs at Huffington Post, Inc., and Forbes. And especially for the people who are in my private mentoring or mastermind group, I'm going to write about you, but I'm also willing to write about just the people who are killing it. I want to hear about how you're succeeding so that you can help other people as well, so that you can get that huge credibility. Joe Polish, one of my mentors, said that life gives to the givers and takes from the takers. That is how gamification works. If you're crushing it in this course, I'm going to help you keep crushing it. If you're not, you're going to get penalized. And so I'm doing everything I can to set this course up to keep you motivated. So, how much would a program like this cost? First, I have good news and I have better news. This course is a $997 investment in yourself. But I'm literally going to pay you if you complete this course. Here's what I mean. If you stay with me every single week, if you do all the exercises, if you're a giver and not a taker, if you proactively make this course and this group better, and if you show me that you've radically upgraded your life, all you need to do at the end of the year is send me an email with all of your exercises, provide me evidence that has showed that you've radically improved your life. And if you've done that, I'm probably going to notice because this is a very interactive course. If you do this, I will literally refund your $997 investment. And I will even send you an additional check of $997 as a gift for transforming your life. I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is because I know this science works. You will not find a return like this anywhere. You'll not find this in the real estate market, the stock market, not anywhere. I will double your money for completing this course and transforming your life. Are you up for this challenge? Can you find a course like this anywhere? To make this even easier, I've included a 3-pay option. You can pay $347 now and the remaining balance over the next 2 months. I want to help you stay motivated all year long. So after you register for the course, I'm going to send you a goodie bag with a t-shirt and a coffee mug to totally trigger and help remind you every day to live in momentum. And here's the best part. My book, Willpower Doesn't Work, comes out in March, and you are going to get a forward copy of this book months before anyone else so that you can dig into it. I'm really excited for you to read this book. It's going to blow your mind. Bringing all this together, I want to just quickly talk about the $347 or even $997 investment. It is all psychological. Good advice for most people is to live within your means because honestly, most people don't know how to do that. But good advice for high achievers is to decide what you want and then figure out how to get it. When you want something bad enough, when your why is clear and compelling, you'll figure out how to do it. So once you experience this psychological upgrade, money is no longer a limitation for you. It becomes a tool that you can get whenever you need to accomplish something specific. Are you ready to commit? Is this your point of no return where you invest in yourself, upgrade your psychology, and shatter your subconscious paradigms? Is 2018 going to be your year? Is this going to be the best year where you become the person you want to be? Well, there's a catch. This course is only available for the next 2 days. You have to make powerful decisions. Very few people make true decisions. Hardly anyone invests in themselves. Only outliers change their environment. Successful people are the ones who continually upgrade their lives and their psychology. So, my challenge for you, if this is your year, is to take action right now and push the button below to invest in 52 weeks of momentum if you are one of those people who knows that right now this is your point of no return and that 2018 is going to be your best year ever. When you do, I will see you every week in the course, in the Facebook group, and throughout 2018. I'm Benjamin Hardy. Thank you for joining me on this free training. I look forward to seeing more of you throughout 2018 where we'll help you get massive momentum. So, to wrap this up, push the button below and let's get started.